One of the greats in our local history is Christy Mathewson, known as Matty, who was one of the most accomplished baseball pitchers of all time. During the 1901 New York Giants season, Matty earned the nickname the Big Six because his pitch was as fast as New York City's Big Six Fire Company when putting out a fire. He was one of the famous first 5 baseball players inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame when it was first established in 1936. And I wanted to make sure I just shared a few stats. I almost said Matty's statties or Matt's stats, but some of the key baseball stats, some of you baseball people will know these like the back of your hand. But he won 30 or more games in the regular season 4 times. Threw 3 shutouts over a period of 6 days during the 1905 World Series. In 1913, he pitched 68 consecutive innings without walking a man. In 5 seasons, his earned run average was under 2.0, and in 1909, it was 1.14. In 11 World Series games, he had an ERA of 1.15 and completed 10 games, 2 in extra innings. He completed 434 of 551 games started over 17 seasons. He struck out 434 batters and won 373 games. He still leads the National League in total games won and is tied for 3rd place for all of baseball. So just as a few ideas of just what a phenomenal baseball player Christy Mathewson was. Now, just this is enough to make this worth talking about. But what I really appreciate too are the stories around who he was as a person. And maybe some of the folks in the audience can elaborate a bit on the baseball prowess, but I'm going to go in a little bit more into who he was as a person and what his life was here in Saranac Lake. So his baseball stats are astounding, but it's the person behind the sport that is even more impressive to me. He was a quiet, church-going man who brought virtue to the baseball world in an era when players lived lives full of gambling, drinking, and womanizing. Known as the Christian gentleman, Mathewson never played a game on Sunday. He was a farm boy from Factoryville, Pennsylvania, who attended Bucknell University, where he was class president and an A student. And that was a rare thing in the baseball world. Matty brought honesty to baseball in an era when it was racked by betting scandals. An umpire once said he knew if he got a call right if Mathewson confirmed it. Like most great heroes, Christy Mathewson faced down his share of hardship. His younger brother Nicholas died by suicide, and another brother Henry died of tuberculosis. In World War I, and this was towards, really, he had stopped playing baseball at this point in 1918. He signed up to serve in World War I and served in the Chemical Warfare Service along with baseball greats Ty Cobb and Branch Rickey. 1 year later, suffering from the effects of gas exposure, he developed tuberculosis. Although, of course, you never really know where and when somebody catches TB. His brother had had it years before, and it was a common hazard of being a baseball player. A lot of baseball players did have TB. Really, in any kind of profession where people were living in close quarters and then traveling on trains, they were sharing those germs, and they often, all caught it. So the other thing to mention about World War I is that we're sitting in a room that was dedicated to a World War I soldier. So TB was a huge illness that affected people who served in World War I, also because of the conditions they were in close quarters in the trenches. The flu of that time didn't help people's immune systems. So all of those things was sort of a perfect storm of a TB epidemic that happened right after the war. And waves of soldiers came to Saranac Lake following World War I. Some with gas exposure, some with just tuberculosis. The person behind the screen, John Black, was here during that time too, and maybe they knew each other. So with tuberculosis, Matty came to Saranac Lake, and he hit another famous baseball player, Branch Rickey, had come here with TB in 1908. And so in 1920, Christy Mathewson followed in his footsteps, seeking the fresh air cure. While Matty's presence in town surely caused a stir, he wasn't the only famous person here. In the years after World War I, famous visitors included John Dos Passos, Ernest Hemingway, actor Al Jolson, and President Calvin Coolidge. So Christy Mathewson was not the only famous face in town. He was granted the privacy due all TB patients, and his health slowly improved. By the spring of 1922, he was well enough to throw the first pitch at the season opener between Saranac Lake and Plattsburgh. He moved to Saranac Lake by July 1st, 1920, living first in the Santanoni apartments under the care of Dr. Edward Packard. The Santanoni was one of the fancier places in town with a lot of interesting people that stayed there. Over the years, we know lots of stories associated with that. Dr. Edward Packard was one of those TB doctors that was so important in town, and his son was also a TB doctor who I got to meet when I first started working at HSL. So those generations of doctors are a big part of our history. So after the Santanoni, he also stayed then at 90 Park Avenue, which was a place for World War I veterans that stayed there. And I love this picture because you can match it up today with the walkway in the house. It looks a lot the same. He was renting a room there, and his health slowly improved. His former teammates held a doubleheader to help pay his expenses. At the game, a baseball autographed by Babe Ruth, President Warren Harding, Vice President Calvin Coolidge, and Mathewson was auctioned off. In June of 1922, Mathewson had improved to the point where he threw the first pitch of the season opener between, wait, I already said that, Saranac Lake and Plattsburgh. By December, he seemed nearly cured, and the following year, he became part owner of the Braves. He also did charity work for the effort to cure tuberculosis and aid its victims. Then, in 1924, he moved into this house. He and his wife Jane and their son Christy Jr. moved into one of the prettiest houses in town. It sits on a hill like a pitcher's mound and looks over a lot shaped like a baseball diamond. The wide central staircase has very shallow risers to make it easier for a TB patient to get to the second floor. And that's incredibly noticeable in the house. Like you really almost trip trying to go up the stairs because they're so shallow. The house was built and owned by Harry Hull in 1924. There's a house really similar to this house in Lake Placid across from the Catholic Church. And Harry Hull also built that house. So I'm really curious to get in there someday and see how much they look alike. So Christy Mathewson was a tall man, 6 feet 1.5 inches, and the original bathtub was 6 feet long. Also, all the mirrors in the house were placed too high for the average person to be able to see themselves. And the person who told me that story is Rick Meyer, who described his mother trying to take a bath in that bathtub and like basically drowning because like, there was nothing to support her. So it's kind of a neat story. He has been the proud owner of that house for quite some time. His parents bought the house from Blanche McGraw. So the house was never actually, the deed never shows ownership by the Mathewson family. But we think that, Rick thinks that Blanche McGraw, it was in her name, and she was a close friend of the family. Blanche McGraw was the wife of John McGraw, who was the ferocious baseball manager that worked with Christy on the New York Giants for many years. And they were kind of an unusual team because they were completely opposite personalities. McGraw was sort of your classic bulldog of a baseball manager, and Christy was the opposite. But they complemented each other well and had a lot to do with the success of the team. Blanche was a close friend of Christy's wife, and they shared an apartment in New York City, and she came up and visited quite a lot here. Okay, sorry, I'm reading all these things, I'm just trying to be right. And one other cool thing about the house is that the length of the diagonal in the main part of the house is apparently the distance traveled by a pitched ball in the major leagues. Pretty amazing. Now, whether he actually stood in his own living room and pitched into the fireplace, we don't think so. But he must have appreciated that the inside of the house and really the outside of a lot of the house also feels baseballish. When he felt up to it, Matty would play catch with the neighborhood children, and one day a reporter asked what advice the great baseball player had for the kids. His answer was simple: be humble and gentle and kind. So that is a little bit about what we know about Christy here in town, and what I want to do is share some of the things that Rick Meyer shared with us from the Mathewson cottage. And these things are on display over here. They're just on temporary loan for tonight, and then we're taking them right back to Rick because these are real treasures. One thing that Rick found as a little kid in the, there's like a little seat at the entrance in the house, and there's a lid underneath it and kind of an area underneath. This Rick found underneath the chair in his house. It's signed by Christy Mathewson. Basically, we think a check made out to cash to get $50. And I said to Rick, why do you think he needed cash? Like, what was he doing with this check to get $50 for cash? And Rick said, not to share anything, negative about our wonderful Christy, but apparently he did appreciate sometimes getting a shipment of alcohol to the house. And this is in the 20s during Prohibition, so he might have needed cash for that. He would not have been alone in partaking during Prohibition, and TB patients actually even had alcohol prescribed by the pharmacies. So he might have just gotten something special with that check. This is also incredibly cool. So there are many, many pages that at some point Rick found in the attic of the house that are records, temperature records. They show temperature and pulse. Sometimes it's the pulse, but there's the time of day, 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and then the temperature. And this is classic. The way they monitored TB patients' health was taking their temperature all the time. And he has pages and pages of these things, and I looked through them and I thought, wow, this is cool, but how do we know this is Christy Mathewson? Well, then on this one page, and this all the handwriting is the same, we found Wednesday, August 12th, Christy Sr.'s birthday. So on his birthday, he was there in the house trying to get better from TB, and this was the year that he died. So this was all in 1925. So he died, just a couple months after that, not even. So those are really incredible records, and they show right at the end, like into October, right around now, his temperature started going up just a little. It's not a real high fever, which is strange about TB that it acted that way, but you could see it getting into the hundreds. It was like low 100, and then the temperature starts just ended. I think the last one, I forget, we have it there, but the last one was a few days before he died. And I'm sure, as much as he probably was feeling very sick, we don't really know. I mean, maybe somebody knows that in some of the accounts of his life. People could feel extremely sick and then they could rally. Dr. Trudeau, that was all his life. He would go through periods of time where I'm sure people felt like he was on his deathbed, and then things could turn around. And so I'm sure they had hope that he was going to really improve. He was a big man and a very, overall, incredibly healthy guy. So it was really a shock to the baseball world when the news came out that he had died. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but I want to show you one other really fun treasure that Rick Meyer found in the house. And this is this menu from an event involving the New York Giants in Florida. And it just says Wednesday, November 22nd. It was at a hotel in Miami, which no longer exists. I looked for it and couldn't find it. But it's this funny menu where once you read through it, you start to see these last names, right? So there's lamb broth a la Wilson, macaroni Paulette, and then the funny thing is they misspelled Mathewson, but we know that this is Mathewson. There's no way that isn't Christy Mathewson. And then there's a lot of other names too. Wiltsey pudding, Herzog pie. So being a goofball when it comes to these sorts of things, I thought, well, what can Google tell us about this? First of all, what's the year, right? Wednesday, November 22nd. It wasn't hard to find. this reference in the New York Times. So this was in 1911, and it was after the New York Giants had lost the World Series to Philadelphia. I think they had their winter games, the Winter League or something, and they were down there getting ready to go to Havana for a game, and the hotel put on this event for them. So then I thought, well, that's super cool. Let's see what else we can find. Well, lo and behold, thanks to Google, we found these people. So let me just show you who they are. I love this because suddenly this menu just like came to life for me. So here is Beals Becker sherbet, Buck Herzog pie, Art Devlin cake, Art Fletcher sauce, lamb broth a la Art Wilson. So I love that there's 3 arts on the menu. And we have a few more baseball players. We have potatoes a la Grover Hartley, bluefish Doc Crandall style, macaroni Jean Paulette, Murphy's a la Larry Doyle. And that's a name, hold on, don't go past him so fast. Woo, come on Larry, there we go. So Larry Doyle, you all will know, was a roommate, had roomed with Christy years before, was a fellow New York Giant, obviously on the same team. He came down with TB 22 years later after Christy Mathewson was here, and came to the sanatorium in 1942. So he stayed just down the road from the Mathewson cottage in the Trudeau Sanatorium. And he was a famous guy around town. People remembered him. He was a nice man who sat on his porch and talked to the kids. He liked to have a beer down at the bar, and they called him Laughing Larry Doyle. He was a very upbeat man. And one of our local characters, when the sanatorium closed, a famous photographer came to take pictures of the closure, and one of the famous pictures was of Larry Doyle walking down the road with his suitcase. It was kind of a staged picture, but it was a really great picture. And so there we are with Larry Doyle. And that card was years before Larry Doyle knew that he would end up here in Saranac Lake or catch TB himself. So those are some of the teammates, and we still have a few more Giants to go. I love this. We also have Josh DeVore Celery and Hooks Wiltsey Pudding. What a great name is that, Hooks Wiltsey. Some of you baseball players probably know these people, right? Do these names ring a bell to you? A little bit? Okay. And I don't know, maybe you've heard of this guy. Christy Mathewson, Diamond Toast Socks. So I love imagining the New York Giants at the game having this meal in Florida. Not all the Giants on that team were on the menu. One of the more interesting Giants to me on the team was the person they called Chief Meyer? He was a Native American baseball player. Was Bender? Yeah, and he's not on the menu. I looked everywhere for him. But in a book that Rick Meyer loaned me last year about Christy Mathewson, one of the things they talked about was his how he was very caring of the other players, and he particularly looked out for that player because he really experienced a lot of difficulty being a Native American person. There was a lot of sort of derogatory stuff that he faced, even just being called that name. That wasn't his name. But Mathewson really stood up for him. So I hope he was at the dinner. Another thing that we have that's sort of around in Saranac Lake is this letterhead. There was a committee that was formed after his death to try to raise some money for a memorial for Christy Mathewson. It never happened. We're not sure why. We believe that Jim Clark will figure this out someday. But in a local paper, they described this effort, and they said there was a national memorial to the late Christy Mathewson that is being planned. The memorial will be erected at Saranac Lake, and it has been given the endorsement of the American Legion. The purpose of the memorial is to perpetuate the name of Christy Mathewson by a fund to be used to aid the sick and needy who came to Saranac Lake for treatment from all states in the Union, and by improving their physical, intellectual, ethical, and social nature. The big leagues are doing their part towards financing the memorial by staging benefit games. On May 28th, the first benefit game was played at Braves Field, Boston, between the Giants and the Braves. A memorial tablet to Matty was unveiled before the game. The tablet read in part in memory of Christopher Mathewson, gallant sportsman, courageous soldier, kindly, gentle man. So I would love to know what happened to that plaque and what happened to the effort. Now, this was pretty close to the Great Depression, when big plans like this kind of went south, and it might have had something to do with that. So a few other things to share, and then I want to hand this over to a couple folks in the audience. We were talking about the Matty League, and that's one of the legacies of Christy Mathewson was that a league was established in Saranac Lake for younger kids. Rick Myers says that the story went that it was organized at the counter of Rick Myers' dad's store. Some people were just sitting around and they said, you know what, we should start a league for the little kids and we'll call it the Matty League. So this young man is in the audience today, and I thought maybe he would like to share a little information with us. This is David Webb, who lived right down the street from the Mathewson cottage. You want to tell us a little bit about what we have here?
I'm Dave Webb, and I was born in Saranac Lake. We moved away when I was 2 years old. We lived in Texas, we lived in Philadelphia. But we came up here every single summer. My mom was from here, she was born here. And I got to play Little League Baseball in Matty League. And I played, I think, in 1960, 61, 67. It was a lot of fun. Now, I also played Little League Baseball back in Philadelphia where I grew up. And that was in the spring, so I got to play Little League Baseball twice every year. I got to play in Philadelphia in the spring, and I came up here in the summer and got to play in the Matty League. And it was an awful lot of fun. The difference was this. Philadelphia, they only gave us a t-shirt. Here, when I played in Matty League, I got a whole uniform. And I'm telling you, that was pretty special. That was a pretty big deal. And I think I wore that to bed sometimes. It really was a lot of fun. So we lived on 32 Old Military Road, grandparents did, and that's where I was born. And we were only about 3 houses up from where the Myers live now. 3 houses up from the Christy Mathewson lived. Of course, we didn't overlap at all. So I never had the opportunity to meet him. But his wife was still there when my mother grew up, just 3 houses. So it was a great time. It was a great place to play baseball. It was a great time.
Before we let go of David, I want to talk a little bit about this sweater in the back of the room. And maybe David, you can talk about it, and then I'll show a picture to go along with it.
So back in the teens, the players in the school did not have jackets. They wore sweaters like this. And this particular sweater was built, it's knitted, I guess, and this is a replica, it's not the real thing. But this is for a trip, a barnstorming trip that Matty took along with the Giants, and they also were accompanied by the Chicago White Sox. And they started when the season was over, and those 2 teams traveled across the country to small towns that normally didn't get Major League Baseball. And when they got to the West Coast, they got on a boat and they went to Japan, and they continued the trip around the world. Except that Matty decided that when they got to the West Coast, that was it for them, which was probably a pretty good move, because they had a 17-day trip by boat to get to Japan, which was their first stop. And they had nothing but bad weather, storms. Everybody got sick. The players lost weight. People would just not feeling well. So Matty knew what was going on, and he didn't make that trip. I've got a friend who owned Mitchell and Ness, which was a big sporting goods company, and they sort of merged into and started making replica baseball uniforms. And so that's what he did for a living. And this is they also made items like this, which are sweaters instead of jackets. So he kind of the rappers discovered him. So the rappers, music guys, about 20 years ago started wearing his uniforms. And every time they wore one of his replica uniforms, he would sell it. He did orders for like 5,000, 10,000 of these things. And he ended up making a lot of money, retiring. He was a good guy. He deserved it. But he told me about hanging out with the rappers in Miami and going to these, going to their places, and he just was a little out of place. He's a straight arrow kind of guy. But he said, the rappers have a pretty good life. That's what he said. So, and they made him wealthy. He sold his business for all the money. So, anyway, this is what Matty would have worn on the trip. Of course, he didn't go overseas. He just went as far as the West Coast. But this is what he would have worn. What would have kept it warm. This is exactly the way his would look. Same colors. Even having this same little ending down here.
That's really awesome. Thank you, David. And it's really special that David may have acquired this and is providing it to the museum. We hope to show it over at the Trudeau building soon when we open the new exhibit. So pretty exciting. Yeah.
I don't know if I needed my name on that.
Sure you do.
And let me just say one more thing. Baseball is such a good sport. It comes in the spring when everything is growing and the grass is coming up and the weather's getting warm and we just feel good about ourselves. And it goes in the fall when the weather starts to be bad. People are outside, so it's a great game.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And I think one of the things, the bigger picture of baseball in Saranac Lake, which Jim can speak to, is, this story, Matty, is just one story of so many teams and people that were involved, from little kids to semi-pro leagues, and these enormous games that happen all through town, and even like in the field in going out to Rainbow Lake, like in whatever that is, Capers, yeah. They, that was huge. There were huge games going on there. So it's amazing to see how it was such a part of the community and how things have changed. I mean, it's one of those things that we have sort of let go of, and it's kind of sad because it was such a part of our community. I want to show you the picture of the sweater on Matty. So here's the sweater itself. You can see what a great replica that is. This is at the Baseball Hall of Fame. This is the actual 1913 sweater. And this is a beautiful picture of Matty with Christy Jr. wearing the sweater. And I think just because it's a black and white picture, you don't see the color, so it looks a little different, but I think it's the same sweater. Christy Jr. Went to high school here and graduated from Saranac Lake High School. And went on to have an interesting life himself, but it's just a beautiful picture. So if and when we show the sweater, I think a picture like this goes with it. It's perfect. So before I talk a little bit more, I want to show a little piece of a one-man show that we've recorded. But Jim, would you like to talk a little bit more about the Matty League and maybe share some of the things that you have on the poster? Or do you think it's better if we all kind of gather around? What do you think? Do you want to bring it over? Okay, why don't we bring it over? Yeah, why don't you just... Sure, yeah. This feels so formal because I have my microphone. I'm just trying to make sure everybody can hear it.
You just might need to have you hold this up over your head.
So one more thing.
Like an early chair. That might not be a bad idea.
Let's try that.
Yeah, that's great. Let's just... You want to stay
Or stay out. Yeah.
So I'll hold up a little bit of this.
on.
So when Amy mentioned that we're going to have recognition or some celebration of the 100 years that Christy Mathewson has been gone. And Saranac Lake was certainly in the news before his passing because he was here. And I wanted to try to find a few things of interest. So this up here is it's register of death or death certificate. So it's on file here in the Saranac Lake Village office, and very nicely they gave me a copy. So it just has the vital information about his mother and father's name, and his wife Jane signed it that the information is correct. And then Amy had mentioned Dr. Edward Packard, who was his physician, so Dr. Packard has to also sign. And it mentions that he saw Christy on the last day was October 7th, the day that he did pass away. Dr. Packard certifies that he did see him, and that the cause of death was pulmonary tuberculosis, and then Dr. Packard signs it here. And then one thing that really struck me was how fast news spread. Now, this says on here, Christy died at 10:30 in the evening on October 7th. And I found numerous newspapers around the country the next day, October 8th, were carrying the news. And he just died at 10:30 at night on the 7th. And this one is from Long Branch, New Jersey, the Daily Record. It was just a big headline in their paper here that Christy died last night. This one down here caught my attention. This is from Juneau, Alaska. The very next day, October 8th, they carried it up in Alaska. Christy had passed away. The Scranton, of course, our Adirondack Daily Enterprise back in the mid-20s was published, but those papers are long gone. They were either lost in a fire or in a flood. It would be great to know what was said locally. But this story I found only in the Scranton, Pennsylvania paper, October 9th, 1925, and it says, "Simple ceremony marks departure from Saranac Lake. Widow declines escort." So this talks about Christy's trip leaving Saranac Lake, and it mentions in here that his body was brought to the train station here in Saranac Lake. The train was leaving at 9:30 at night, but it went through the streets of Saranac Lake, and people along the streets, it says in here, they bowed their head in reverence. And I would love to have a local paper, like, was it just I don't know where the funeral home was located. Was it just a simple one up Broadway or Bloomingdale Ave, or did it make a trip around numerous streets? But apparently people lined the path, and as it says, they bowed their head in reverence. And then it mentions that the train left Saranac Lake at 9:30 at night. It went to Utica, to Albany, to New York City, and then on to Pennsylvania. And the part about, it says here, widow declines escort. So the next day, on October 8th, a group of veterans went up to visit Jane Mathewson, and they offered a military escort for the body from Saranac Lake until it got to Pennsylvania. And she declined, and it says in here that she told the veterans that came up to visit her that many of those veterans were suffering from the same illness that Christy was suffering from, and she did not want them to have to be put through a trip which might affect their health. And from what I've also read in other papers, there was a military veterans group waiting for the train when it finally arrived in Pennsylvania. So he did have his military greeting when he got there, and I'm sure the local vets obviously were there and trained up. So, Christie's, one of the things that just carried on his name is obviously the baseball league. And in 1953, Amy did mention this, I found an article in the paper that in the spring of '53, 3 people were sitting at a lunch counter at Meyer Drugs. And it's just ironic that Christy and Jane lived in the house. The Meyer family has lived in that house. The only 2 families to live there. And literally, the discussion started at Meyer Drugs. There were 3 gentlemen. It was Earl Drake, Father Vernon Doe, and Gus Dandrell. And they talked about, why don't we get youth baseball going? That was in the spring of 1953. And it's amazing how quickly they got it going. And the first officers of the league, which I have down here, is Earl Drake, Joe Stephen, he was a local attorney here in Saranac Lake. And Andy Fortune Sr. was the treasurer, and Larry Doyle was the commissioner. So they got Little League going, and it was for ages 8 through 16. And they divided it up into what they call the senior circuit, ages 13 to 16, the junior circuit, 8 to 12. And the first game was played on July 8, 1953, up at the Petrova Field. And it was a game between the Saranac Lake team called the French Hill Irishmen against the Bloomingdale Junior Firemen. Saranac Lake won the game by a score of 5-2. And when I found the story of this paper, and whoever Bob St. Clair is, I never heard the name before, but he is the one that wrote the story about the first game. I assume he was an employee of the Enterprise, but Bob St. Clair, I never really heard the name. And for me, the first game, what were other firsts? So I had to dig a little deeper, and the first pitch, the first batter, the first pitch was thrown by a young man named Larry Smith. And he's a person that I remember him later in life. He played in the local softball league. The first base hit ever in the Matty League was a youngster named Jerry Shore from Bloomingdale. And then I had to find out what other firsts were there. There was a first home run. A great achievement to hit a home run. And what's even makes it more remarkable when I say who hit the first home run, he's sitting here with us tonight. So I would like to recognize the first home run ever in the Matty League was hit by Tom Finnegan. Tom played third base in that game. Yes. So this is the write-up in the Enterprise. It's a game story. This is the box score. The different players, almost all of them last names, but I do have another article. I found a lot of first names of the players. And then over here is just some baseball cards that I've collected through the years of Christy Mathewson. Some were given to me. I like to point out, these are not the baseball cards that you see on eBay or someplace for thousands of dollars. These are reprints. So they're, to me, they don't, I couldn't give you a dollar figure, but I like to say they're priceless because they're Christy Mathewson and they're here in Saranac Lake. And there's a couple, the one that Amy showed earlier, Christy Mathewson, and this card over here, and this is the back of the card. There's only a couple of the Christy Mathewson cards that when you turn it over, it mentions where he was born and where he died. So that picture that Amy showed earlier, the baseball card, on the back of that card it mentions Saranac Lake, and this card here is one of the other few ones that do mention Saranac Lake. And so, oh, here's a schedule that it's 55 years old. I couldn't go back to the very beginning because I don't know if there was a schedule, but This is from 1970. Little League baseball for a lot of years in Saranac Lake, it did not start until the middle of June, and it went all the way to the end of August. So Dave had a long season playing spring Little League, and then he came up here, and the games went to the end of August, and sometimes the playoffs for Little League even went into September. It was one of the few sports for the youth in Saranac Lake, mostly boys. Eventually, a few girls played, then they started the youth softball league. But it was a long summertime sport, baseball here in Saranac Lake. So just a little bit of what I found about the Christy Mathewson name carrying on. And Dave Webb and I were just talking earlier tonight, when did the Christy Mathewson is not referred to the Christy Mathewson League now. When did it, and it's just sort of faded. I can't tell you exactly when, but I do know at one time the youth baseball got more organized, and they had to get an IRS tax ID number. And I think at that time it had to list the name of the organization, and it maybe, I'm just sort of speculating, that it was called the Saranac Lake Youth Baseball, whatever. That was maybe part of the decline of saying always Christy Mathewson. And also, yes?
I don't know if it was Christy Mathewson before that, but it was about 20 years ago.
Could well be.
We got taxed.
Jim, there was a league called the Larry Doyle.
Yeah, because the Larry Doyle League was for ages 13 to 16, and in the very beginning, it was all called the Christy Mathewson League. And then it was, they had two age groups here in the beginning, and then eventually, before it became the Larry Doyle League here in town, it was called the Babe Ruth League, because that was a kind of a name around the country. And then in the early 60s, they changed the local name here to the Larry Doyle League for age 13 to 16.
We just haven't had enough kids for Larry Doyle.
Yeah.
We would still have Larry Doyle, we just don't have enough 13 to 6-year-olds to play.
So there was just a couple of other, I think the Oakland, California newspaper in December of 1923, there was something here about Christy saying to get on the team. The team is going to fight tuberculosis, and it was about buying Christmas seals. But it just amazed me how on October 8th, the day after he passed away, newspapers around the country, from Alaska all over, have picked up. He was such a big name in the sports world, and just revered because for a lot of reasons. Part of it was because he was such a gentleman. And he's brought a lot of recognition to Saranac Lake while he was here, and unfortunately a lot more made the papers because of his death.
Jim, thank you. Round of applause for him. So no surprise that Jim was a very good board member for Historic Saranac Lake for many years. One of the repositories of lots of knowledge. Yes, Jim. Something.
You know, I forget. I wanted to mention a couple of things that I found about Christy. He loved to play checkers. And I have read that when he was playing, that he was always trying to get his teammates to play checkers. So I found this story in the Plattsburgh Press Republican, January 1925, about 9 months before he passed away. There was a gentleman named Newell Banks, and he was the national champion checkers player. He came to Plattsburgh, and he played 23 people at once. And they were lined up on tables, and he went around and he played 23 people at once. Now, Christy loved to play checkers. And Newell Banks, he defeated 21 of the 23. One person played him to a draw. One person beat him. And of course, that was Christy Mathewson. And the other thing I wanted to mention, about, and Amy has some information on this, if I missed something, please fill it in, but Rick Meyer had mentioned to me, Rick and I, we grew up together and we've been lifelong friends, but there was a piano in the Christy Mathewson house at one time, and it was made from baseball bats, and it was autographed by players. When Bill and Lenore Meyer, Rick's parents, bought the house, the day before they moved in, the piano was in the house. The next day, when they moved in, the piano was gone. And in 1977, Bill Meyer was interviewed by the Lake Placid News about this piano, and he just said it vanished overnight. Well, Rick, I found this article just recently, and I showed Rick, and so he filled me in more. Several years ago, and I don't know how many, he was talking to Bill Madden, and not the Bill Madden that we know is a great supporter of historic Saranac Lake, but his father, Bill Madden, who's passed away. And Rick and Bill Madden, somehow the piano came up, the story, Rick and Bill Madden said, I know where it is. And Rick's like, where? And Bill Madden said, it's at the Presbyterian Church here in Saranac Lake. And Rick was, I guess, astonished. Rick went down to the church and spoke to someone. Rick saw the piano. It was still there. And he, told him what his interest was, and he offered to buy it because he wanted to put it back in the house. And the people at the Presbyterian Church said that not too long before Rick was there, couldn't say how long, but they had been in touch with Cooperstown at the Baseball Hall of Fame, and they had agreed to give the piano to the Hall of Fame in exchange for 1 or 2 lifetime passes to the Hall of Fame for the Presbyterian Church. Now, I don't know if anybody here that belongs to the Presbyterian Church, but you should ask. Does anybody over there know about lifetime passes to the Hall of Fame? Did you find a picture of the piano?
It's on the Hall of Fame website.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it is in Cooperstown, but I don't know how many years it's spent down
Wait,
there.
the piano's in
Presbyterian
Cooperstown
Church.
now?
Yeah.
It's in the Hall of
There in
Fame
the
now. It's
collection.
there now.
I was just in Cooperstown 2 weeks ago.
I think it's on display. I think it's in the back room. Thank you, Chair. That's awesome. I just have a few more things to share real quick. I don't want to hold everybody too long, but just a couple other tidbits. One thing to look out for in the Matty League stuff that is somewhere in this town. Martin Coop of the Temmings Jewelry, he made 30 engraved championship belt buckles for the boys on the 2 teams that won titles in the junior and senior leagues. So we have a ton of Matty stuff that comes to us. A ton of Temming stuff that is shared with us over the years. We have a lot on display back here that has to do with the pet exhibit. So look out for it. If you see anything with baseball on it, we would love to see that. We get things all the time coming into our collection. This photo arrived today, of all things. So this is a picture of Jack Dempsey in Saranac Lake, obviously, with a bunch of Saranac Lake baseball players. And apparently, Matty Jr. is in the picture. And we think it's maybe him. I thought it might be him, but we think it's actually him. So just one of those things that just arrived. Jack Dempsey came to town a few times in the 20s, and there we go. So, and I just want to share about 3 minutes of a little segment from a show. So this guy, Eddie Frierson, when I first came to HSL over 15 years ago, Mary Hotelling would talk about him. He's a friend of hers. She brought this show here. Does anybody remember seeing it in town? It's a one-man show about Christy Mathewson. And as we were planning this, I thought, hey, let's reach out to him. Or actually, we already had reached out to him. So I met with him online and interviewed him, and we talked about the show. And it was very interesting, and we hope to bring him here at some point. It's not a small thing. He's in California. He has like this whole set that he brings, so it's kind of a big production. But he knows what he's doing. It's actually very cool. This is, he came here twice with the show when he was just developing it. They put it on a Pendragon. He doesn't look quite that young anymore, but he still does the show. In fact, he's doing it tonight on the anniversary of Christy's death at the Playhouse in Santa Monica. But I asked him if he had something he would like to share with us from the show, and he shared this just a couple of minutes, and it's called, well, he'll set it up for us.
My last thoughts are words of advice to the boys of this country, and words can't really express the feelings that I have for all the young people in this land. But I'll try. By all means, play ball, because it'll bring you to rub elbows with the world, and it will teach you much if you will but learn. It'll teach you about the business game. I think it'll teach you about the life game, too. Now, many a young man of all abilities used to come up to me all the time and say, "Hey, Matty, should I try and make the big league?" And to that, I always said, yes, try, if you love the game. But if you can't make the big league, give it up. Try another game. Don't spend the best years of your life in any minor league. Try to find a vocation that can make you happy, one in which you can make an honest living for yourself, but most importantly, one in which you can meet many kind and true friends. I found it's not the glory on the ball field, it isn't the applause, and it certainly isn't the money that buys contentment for us in this lifetime, but it's our family and our friends that make our greatest happiness and most enduring success. Now, if you were young players who had just achieved sudden or seeming great success, you've heard the applause, you felt the pat on the back. Do not allow it to go to your head, because conceit and overconfidence are the two worst enemies that a player can have. Soon or late, you must fall and go back. I did. We all do. But if you've been humble and appreciative and haven't taken yourself too seriously in your sudden burst of bloom, then when you fall, you can fall gracefully. You can look back happily. You can still feel that firm grip of many kind and true friends. My good friend, George M. Cohan, wrote, "Life's a very funny proposition, you can bet, and no one's ever solved the problem properly as yet. Young for a day, then old and gray, like the rose that buds and blooms, then fades and falls away. Losing health in search of wealth as through this dream we tour. Everything's a guess, nothing's absolutely sure. Battles exciting, faiths we're fighting until the curtains fall. Life's a very funny proposition, after all." It's not easy. Give your friends names that they can live up to. Throw your best pitches in the pinch. Be humble and gentle and kind. And remember, if you're able to touch just one life in a positive manner, you have succeeded in your own.
So channeling Christy Mathewson a little bit. He's a very nice man, and obviously cares quite a bit for this story. That's really wonderful. Thank you. That speech is a compilation of some things that Christy wrote and said, and that one line, "Be humble and gentle and kind," is the quote that the newspaper reporter quoted him as saying here to some kids down the street. So maybe kids a little older than you, David, but it's pretty neat that we know that comes from here. And I just want to end today with a picture of where Christy has been for the last 100 years. He's been, well, this is another picture in our collection of him a little bit older. This is his gravesite at Bucknell. I imagine some of you have been here and seen it. No? I think it was just this past spring. It was this spring. My son is running, and he's a runner in college, and he had a track meet at Bucknell. And it was a moment where I kind of needed some hope. We had just gotten some news from the federal government that they were trying to take away $250,000. And it came with a note that said, the federal government is redirecting money so that we can properly honor America's heroes. And I thought, who are our heroes right now? Christy Mathewson should be a hero. There's no politics there. It's just a really good guy, right? And an amazing in so many ways. And so I thought about all that as I drove to Bucknell. It's kind of a long drive. I got there, I drove fast because I wanted time to find his gravestone. And I got there and realized, oh, this is kind of a big place. I'm not going to run out of time. But I found that the Bucknell is this beautiful campus. The field is gorgeous, and it says Bucknell on one side, and then there's this big scoreboard that says Christy Mathewson Stadium. And right across from the stadium is the graveyard. And I walked over there, and I walked in, and I just kind of walked up the hill, and I saw this big stone, and I saw the baseballs next to it, and a baseball bat. And it's Christy's there with his wife and with Christy Jr. I wrote a little thing about it, and I've shared some of that tonight, but basically it was very good to see him there. And to know that he still, I think, still means a lot to us 100 years later. So thank you for coming tonight and for sharing the wonderful stories and artifacts. And we look forward to sharing this recording with folks that couldn't be here, including the Meyer family and Eddie Frierson in Santa Monica. So thank you, everybody. And please stick around and take a look at what we have over across the way.